Actually, what I'm going to do, and then, okay, so you have basically this interface, as it is at this point is you have, kind of a menu where you type in a number to select the action you want to do, right? And so that's represented in code here. I see. So what you're doing is so you have this thing that's in a num, and it defines some codes here for the outputs, and then you say the value mapping to the actual let's see. So with an enum, when you iterate with a for loop, I guess it produces these. I don't even remember that off the top of my head, but that's what I'm inferring it's doing from this line here. Is that right, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. So this will have x dot value, which would be like 0 mapped to the what's the value in this dictionary?
Actually, that should be next encounter. The value equals. So you got
So it'd be like capital action, capital type dot next encounter. Is that what it would be?
actually, let's see. No, value is the zero. It's the zero, and then and then I do
Oh,
a lookup. I
the
get
value,
the
and what's
action.
no, I mean, x dot value is the key of this dictionary, but what's the value of this dictionary? What's the type of the values in the resulting dictionary?
Well, that would be the menu items themselves
The menu items? Okay.
in action
It'd
type.
be it
Yeah,
so it'd be like action type dot next encounter, for example.
right, right. If you
Is that correct? And then okay,
right,
so it'd be 0. So the dictionary would be something like, 0 action type dot next encounter. Um,
well the
is that correct?
well actually, let's see, action types. Actually, it's just let's see. Um, I think it's just going to give you it'll give you the what action types. Action types. I think that's what it's going to give us.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll give
Just
us,
asking because I'm not sure that I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I think it's something like this.
yeah. Well, you could actually, well, if you print out, you could actually put the for loop. You've got a for loop there. You could duplicate that and just print out the action types to see what it looks like.
Yeah. Um,
All I'm doing is I'm just building the menu,
gotcha. Yeah.
but I'm doing it generically because I was finding that I was constantly adding and removing menu items because I'm building this as I'm going, and I don't want to have to constantly recode for a menu item when I can just add something to the.
Oh, wait a second. No, no. I think okay. Actually, I think I need to call up the docs of the library to remind myself because I think I'm actually way off here. Let me do that and screen share that. Okay. So library enum. Okay. So okay. So this is what I'm looking for. So the enum class has like return each member. Okay, so each member meaning the like this is a member in that sense.
Right.
Okay. And so that's going to be um let's see here. I bet these are actually int enums, actually. Or they, or actually, I'm not sure if that's true. Or I'm wondering if these members are of type enum also, or what their type is. Do you know what the type of this thing is here,
No, I
Jim?
don't. I'd have to loop it and just print it to see what it comes up with.
Right. So let me. So I'm demonstrating to you all how I, use the docs with code I'm not immediately understanding how I go about it, right? Notice that what I do is I always ask myself, I always want to know, first of all, what's the type of everything? Okay. What's the type of this? Is it also of type of num, which you can have, you can have a class and you can have members that are attributes of that class, which are also of that class, right? But maybe that's not what's happening here. So now I'm just looking for like using a for loop. That's not making it easy to search for that. Okay, actually, here we go. I think that it's actually. Well, let's see. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just for expediency, if I was just taking my time, I might had unlimited time, I might go ahead and just keep reading this. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to try running the code.
Before you do that, you might want to remove the indents for the last from the last two lines because they're actually, uh, yeah, those uh, unindent one.
They're top level
Actually, they're one in. They're one indent in.
like
Same way
that.
with the continue. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I
Okay,
didn't put all my error checking in there, but I just wanted to have something that would work.
okay. So okay, so good. So now it runs. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this thing. And then, Jim suggested this a while back, right? I think it sounded like he did. And so now it prints this out. And so it says the keys and the values. Okay, yeah. So that validates what we're, was suspecting. The values in this dictionary are the things here. And then what I'm going to do is say 0. And I'm going to, so now we have it's printed out. So what I've done is printed out um, log. I'll just say, let's make it. Okay, so log it's prints it out and renders out a string as next encounter, right? That's what it does. I don't have to put a space in there. So now what I'm going to do is the type. So this is how okay, so this validates what I was thinking. I was thinking that this is an instance of a num, right? So, whenever you're trying to understand code that you don't immediately fully grok, like in this case, I haven't worked with enums in a little while, so I've like forgotten a lot about it. So I have to remind myself, and then a lot of these details. And so what helps so much is if you just focus on knowing, on asking yourself, what's the type of this? What's the type of this? What's the type? And like every single expression, every single variable, every single object, every single attribute of every object, uh, give yourself clarity on what type it is, and that just makes making sense of it so much faster and easier and more successful whenever you can do that. Okay, and so here what I'm doing is I'm just literally printing out what is the type of this, right? Or if you're in an IDE, you can usually just put the cursor on it in a certain context and it'll tell you. So here this is a num, the action type of num. Okay, all right, so now enum objects have some methods, right? So we have the um, for action in action types, we're building the prompt, have the string rendering of the action, and then we have it's getting the let's see here, action the key associated with that value. Okay, yeah. So actually, yeah. So action types is a dictionary. Action is the key in the dictionary. If you say for X in some dictionary, it iterates over the keys. And in this case, the keys are the integers 0, 1, and 99. Okay. In this dictionary called action types, the keys are integers 0, 1, and 99. And the values in that dictionary are these things, which are actually also instances of the action type class, which is self is okay. So what he's saying for key in this dictionary. Now, something you could have done here, Jim, instead, you say action kind of, oh, let's
Could I do
see.
a comprehension? I was thinking about, I just thought about that. Could I do a comprehension of some sort? Like, is there a string comprehension I could do?
Well, actually, I was going to think something else. Action type, let's call it
Oh, okay.
items.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like you could have done this. There's nothing wrong with what you did. You just,
Hmm.
this is another thing you could have done, right?
Oh, yeah. That makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So
since it is a dictionary, you're right.
right, right, yeah. And again, this is fine. But something else you could have done. So and then so you construct this string, and then you have a while loop that gets, collects the user input, and then you say, um, and then you're going through and if, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so tell me now what you're okay, now I understand what it is you're doing here. So tell me what was your question about it?
Well, it just is using an enum the best way to handle this, or is it better to use a custom class? And
I
you
mean,
mentioned either,
I think it's a perfectly fine way. Some people might think it's a little bit more com like indirect, because what you're doing is you have an action. Okay, that's the abstraction, right? The
right,
abstraction is an action, and then you have an input code, which is the number, right? Or command, you could almost think of it, but whatever you want to call that. And then you have a text description, and then you have also the handler for it, by the
right,
way, right? And what you could do is you can make some kind of action class that that has a process method that will. Now what's a little bit tricky here is that you have to would have if you use that, you would have to have a consistent signature against for all of them, which may or may not be something you would that would work in practice, especially as this gets more complicated. But you
right.
could do that, and then
Yeah.
so you could have but you could have using an enum is probably not what I would do, because it's just a way. An enum is a representation, is an implementation detail of how the structure of the organization can be represented. And I think here it adds enough complexity that it distracts. It's almost like, the num class is like, hey, look at me, and it won't let you pay attention to anything else when you read this code. So for that reason, I probably would not choose to use an enum in this case. I would just have a class called action, and that would have a constructor. Here, I'll put it in a new file. Code, and then let's see. So we have code, and then label, let's call it. And then you have, self.code equals code, and then self.label equals label. Okay. And then you could have, like I said, a process command, and then X, Y, and Z. Like I said, if you take this approach, you would want to have the same arguments. And maybe when I want to make that an abstract class.
What about having an args, quargs uh, parameter?
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't do it that way, because here you're going to, how would you, because you're going to have to, so where I'm going with this is that instead of calling process encounter here, or calling process round here, and not calling, like implicitly, you imagine it calling a function that does nothing here. right? Um, you're not only going to call something your action dot process method once and pass in basically the superset of all arguments that all process methods would need, right? So
And that
data
can't be
and
variable.
happens.
And that couldn't be variable. It has to be a
Well,
fixed
the
list.
thing is, well, how would you even handle it if it was variable, right? Because you would call it once in here. So let's say let me kind of continue with this here. Okay,
Okay.
so meta class equals abc dot abc meta. Okay, and then you'd have class. What do you have? Next encounter action, which takes no arguments. You just call super dot init, um, zero, what was it? Zero and then you'd have a concrete, which would process method, which would do like the basically this, you know, right? So it completely ignores the combatants one. And then you'd have, a next what is it? Next attack. And then that would basically do that. And then you'd have the quit
Hmm.
action. And then you'd have what would you do there? Um might even have it raise exception, raise quit exception, and have a that,
Right. Mhm.
which is not an error, it's just signaling we want to break out of the loop, right?
Right.
Then you say while true, let's let's see. Um Wait a second. How did that work? Because the type from input is a string, right? But the type of the keys in this dictionary are integers. Did this actually work, Jim? Yeah,
Yes.
it did because I just
Yeah.
ran it.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Action prompt is just that's just the built string that contains all the menu items. And then the
Yeah,
action raw contains
but
the
yeah, but the user types in a something and then presses enter, which is returned by the input function as a string, I thought.
right. Okay. Well, what's happening is action. I missed a step where we assign action to action raw.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so action raw, maybe you just say, is it something like action equals int
Act,
action raw?
yeah. And I actually go through a loop that checks for a non-numeric or non-valid action type.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just do it this way.
Yeah.
I think it's close enough. In fact, we'll skip a step.
Sure.
And if there's a stack trace, that's the user's problem, not mine. Okay. So now we say, what we may want to do, um, so this is maybe not the optimal way to organize it, because now what we want to do is, because we have some redundancy. mm, let's say actions. Oh, I got it like this. Actions equals next encounter action. We have next attack action, then quit action. Then we say actions map equals action dot, what did I call that? Code action or action in actions. Okay. So then what we do is we have the action code, let's call this. Okay. And then we say action equals actions map action code. And the way we handle this situation is we say try. And if it's not in there, we say that raises a key error, because that's what dictionaries do. When you reference a dictionary key that is not in the dictionary, it does this. Okay. Then we say, and then we say action dot um, label, or maybe code, or I'm not sure if we want to do that or label, but we give them something valid action as not a valid action. Okay, so continue. But assuming that does not take place, then what we do is we say, and then we say, try. We have another try loop, action dot process data event, some of which these variables somehow magically appear in scope. And we say except quit, except exception, and then that's break. So what I would do is probably something closer to this, because I think it's more clear what's going on, especially as we extend the functionality. Because the way you did it, I mean, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, except that it really just, that enum, the fact that you're using enum is just constantly in your face throughout the entire code base. And it's, to me, it just distracts a little bit from what we're actually accomplishing. It's like we've arranged our code in a way that this implementation detail of using enums is must be at the forefront of our minds at all times. And I worry about the cognitive cost of that and the maintainability cost of that as we flesh this application out more.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and maybe it wouldn't be that bad.
No,
But
well,
this is
I
what
like what you're doing. Yeah. I
this
like what
is
you're doing.
closer to what I would do. Yeah.
Right.
And
And yeah,
know,
especially where I'm planning on taking this is initially this is just to get it working within, let's say,
yep.
a command window, but eventually I want to wrap it inside a GUI or inside of a web framework. And at that point, then having classes to execute will allow me to assign a button click to, let's say, a widget button click to an action, and that'll make it a lot cleaner, because then I don't have to do a lot of refactoring versus the class enum it would be a mess.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you
Yeah,
could just have multiple
exactly.
UI classes, right, for
Yeah.
each kind of interface you want.
Yeah. So that would make it easy. In fact, we could probably even move that. What would it make sense to move it into like a view, like a viewer
Yeah,
instead?
sure.
Yeah. So you put that in the
Yeah.
viewer, which would call these classes in the model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Great. Thank you very much. That kind of takes me to the next level, because I was thinking one way just to get it working, but I was also thinking about scalability, and that's what kind of triggered the question in the first place about
Yeah, I
class
think
enums versus
scalability
regular.
is not quite the right word. I think what you're taking, I know where you're going with that. You're talking
Yeah.
about how to make it easier to evolve the code in the direction you know you will need to evolve it eventually.
Right. And
Right.
this is more generic than it's more generic than having, as you said, that enum screaming at you every step of the way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No. I am enum. I exist. Acknowledge my existence with all your conscious awareness at all times.
Sounds
Yeah.
like you need a t-shirt with enum with a big red slash through it.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to go too far in the opposite direction either.
It's a nice class. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's useful.
Well, I
So
appreciate that.
this
Thank
in
you very
Slack.
much for
Yeah.
revealing that. And and showing a way out of it, but also an alternative, which is good.
Uh-huh. So I just put it in Slack for you to look at if you want.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm gonna do
Any,
some refactoring, but also uh,
mm,
start thinking in that that approach. And I was explaining to my son who's going to be taking Python next year in his senior high
nice.
and as a senior high elective, I'm going to spend some time over the summer talking about it. And I think the biggest thing that I got out of the boot camp is that there's the idea that you're coding within a box. Then you step out of the box. But what the boot camp does is basically say, get rid of the box, just explode it, because if you think that everything is an object, you really have to go beyond just the standard like C++ objects, because Python is object orientation on steroids. Since everything is truly an object, you can get really creative, even to the point of like the last interesting decorator pattern you uncovered and shared.
Yeah.
You, but then it points back to the idea of just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
The
Yeah.
solid principles.
A lot of these things, the reason I know to do this approach is because I've just written so much code. I've
Right.
written so much code in so many different varied forms. And I just did, and I always followed like the John Carmack principle of if you want to implement a software system and you're not sure whether you should do it using, you think of, well, I could design it this way, or I could implement it this way, or I could implement it this way. Like I have A, B, and C, and I'm not sure which is correct. You just do it all three ways, and that takes a ton of time, but you're going to learn so much faster. And I just did that over and over and over. And also just in scenarios where I did not have time to do that, but I still had to write a lot of code that was mission critical. Like if I didn't, the company's depending on it. So, and I've just painted myself into a corner so many times with things like this.
Yes.
Okay. There's almost not a mistake you guys can make that I have not made before.
This is the get it done syndrome. Just get it done, and then you
It's
revisit
more
it,
like
and
you get it done, but then you have to get the next thing done after that. And because of the
yes,
way you got the first part done, that makes the second wave harder, and I have to undo that damage.
yes.
I've just done that a lot. And so I really try with what I'm teaching you all so to let you avoid that as much as possible.
You're teaching us to look for opportunities to do it in a more in a better fashion, not necessarily elegant, but a better way, so that
Yeah.
way it lends itself to the next change.
Yeah, it's not elegant, can be a little bit short-sighted, even though I'm a big fan of elegance,
Yes,
in coding and math and everything else. It can be a little bit short-sighted compared to the long-term context, including the fact that you may not know which directions the code may evolve or need to
exactly.
evolve in the future. So you can design it in a less elegant, but more, in a way, is in some senses a more stupid way that will be
Yeah,
more flexible with respect to possible unknown future requirements.
right.
Yeah.
Perfect. So the next thing you do is you invent a time machine, go forward, and then take studious notes about what the applications actually did. Then you go back in time, and then you make a mint in about 6 months, traveling from company to company to tell them exactly how they need to change their code base, and then you retire.
And if I have that kind of time machine, I'm not going to pay attention to the code. I'm going to look up and take detailed notes on crypto charts for the next 6 months.
Oh yeah, you're gonna do a Marty
Bring that
McFly.
information back and keep it
You're
to
gonna do a
myself.
you're gonna do a Marty McFly and
Yes.
get the
Yeah,
World
exactly.
Series results.
You understand.